Kate Gilmore works in video, sculpture, photography, and performance. Her work's been shown all over the place at institutions including the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, MoCA Cleveland, the 2010 Whitney Biennial, the Brooklyn Museum, MoMA PS1, the Kitchen here in New York City, the Indianapolis Museum of Art, Parasol Unit in London, the Istanbul Museum of Art, the Haifa Museum of Art in Israel, J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, SF MoMA, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and she also did a public art fund project at Bryant Park in New York City. She's won lots of awards and grants and residencies, including the Rome Prize from the American Academy in Rome, where another one of our faculty members, Dave McKenzie, is right now, and Polly Applebaum did it a couple of years ago. The Louis Comfort Tiffany Biennial Award, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council Award for Artistic Excellence, also known as LMCC, where she also did a residency, Franklin Furnace Fund for Performance Art, Art Matters, the New York Foundation for the Arts, or NYFA Artist Fellowship, the Rauschenberg Residency Award, and the Marie Walsh Sharp Space Residency. Her work is in lots of collections. The Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Brooklyn Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, SF MoMA, the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and MoCA in Chicago. She received her BA from Bates College up in Maine, and she got her MFA right here in 2002, so she's an alumna, one of you. And she's been on the faculty here at SVA since 2010, and she's also a mom. Please join me in welcoming.
Thanks. Thank you. As Mark said, I was a breeder, but not a serial breeder. Just one. That's good. That's enough. So I don't like traditional lectures. I hope that's okay. I prefer for these kinds of talks to be conversational because I can sit here and talk about my work pretty easily since I've been doing it a while and I make a lot of it. But I'm really interested in answering the questions that you have about it. And also, I know you have a lot of other questions besides about my work, which I'm also completely happy to answer. So free reign before we start the talk. And if I can answer it, I will. And if I can't, I'll tell you I can't. So just some background on me. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. Like Mark said, I have probably more of an academic background than maybe some people who have become artists. I didn't start making art until college. I wasn't one of those kids, that's born with like the pencil and they're like in school like drawing like girls with dresses for people, I was not that person. I was definitely an eccentric child. However, I was not one of those people who was just like knew they were an artist and that was it. There were lots of things that I was interested in. There are lots of things that I'm interested in. But I went to Bates, which I don't know if you guys know. It's like this small liberal arts school. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., so the school I went to was like smaller than my high school. It basically, I thought I was going to be a writer. My sister's a writer, and I was always like writing like poetry in my journal, And but then I took a ceramics class in college and started making kind of traditional pots, like pottery, and then starting to work in sculpture using pretty traditional sculptural means to make like, plaster casts of bodies or pots, kind of similar to what I'm doing now, but in a not so traditional way. And then I just realized that, art was really the thing that I wanted to do. But I still had this like thing in my head that I had to like have this academic thing, I went to this academic place. I come from this whatever like family where it's like crazy Jews and you have to like be educated and like, you have to be like sort of academic or something. So I followed that path and I was a double major in European history and I wrote my thesis on Nazi women. But I also was an art major focusing on sculpture, but very, like body casts and pottery and stuff like that, which is kind of funny because it's sort of similar to what I'm doing. And then I took some time off, and I lived in Montreal, and I lived in Maine, and I worked with kids with disabilities, like a lot of kids with autism, and using our artistic methods and also other methods, like integrated them into the classroom. But I was really focusing on my work and getting a portfolio together to go to graduate school. And I went to NYU for a semester for my MFA, because I still had this thing where I had to like have this like really strong academic thing, but I hated it there. I really hated it. I mean, NYU is a good school, but for art, I was like, basically I needed to disappear into the studio, because I never had that. Like, I didn't need to like read more and learn. I needed to like make, and then have people come and like beat me up, which was basically my SVA experience. I went to SVA when it was a little more loosey-goosey than it is now. You guys are like in a real MFA program now. I mean, it was great. I mean, it was wild, wild, wild. Like, and I'm still friends with like everyone most everyone, unless they hate me, went to graduate school with. And, you know, I had these amazing teachers, like, I'm trying to think, Suzanne McClellan was here. I wasn't her student, but like she was there. Peter Coyne, Gregory Amanoff was here. I actually worked with Gregory and Sarah Z for my thesis. I mean, he's an abstract painter, but I had, Jake Berteau, who's like this old school painter guy, like I worked with him, So I had this real mix of people coming into my studio, and it was really bad. Like, I would come in and I was making these really, like, it was like, I was in this like labor equals worth thing. Like, if I make 10,000 pillows and put them all over my wall, they're gonna be like, holy shit, she made 10,000 pillows. But then I was like, yeah, I made 10,000 pillows, who the fuck cares? And so I started to realize, like, okay, when people came into my studio, they wanted to make me cry, or they were more interested in talking to me, like either having a conversation, like, because I can be kind of funny and sometimes interesting, and also the chaos of how I made stuff. So that was always like, I built this wall in my studio, my 100 square foot MFA SVA studio, where it was like, this was the finished product, and then behind the wall was like the chaos. And everyone just like they just wanted to go behind the wall, because it was like shit all over the walls and like a mess, and like, and then I would carry these really heavy things down the streets of New York, and it just became clear that the process of making these things was actually the thing that most people were interested in, and the characters that I became while I was like thinking about these projects. So I was making these elaborate installations where I would like force people to go into them even though they didn't want to. Like, so these like big installations, I mean, relatively as big as you could get in your 100 square feet. And no one was going in them. Everyone was like, oh, this is cool. It must have taken a long time to make. And then I realized, okay, I have to just like force something to happen. So I think it was in David Rowe's class that I was just like, somehow force something to happen. Force the self into the work. Even if it's crappy, just do it. So I started taking these photographs of these kind of iconic female characters. Martha Stewart, Hillary Clinton. I was dressing up as a Hillary Clinton a lot in graduate school. I'm still kind of like obsessed with Hillary Clinton. Beware, 2016. So I was dressing up as like a prom queen or a Jersey girl, and then I would build like these elaborate structures as these characters. So, and then they would exist as photographs. So it would be like Martha Stewart was like building a mud hut, or Hillary Clinton was like storing canned goods in Ted Kaczynski's shack, So it still had this really strong making quality, which I'm still super invested in. I'm invested in making and studio practice, but then it started to get like kind of a little more interesting and funny, but also dealt with like what it meant to be an artist and what it meant to be this like female body making art. And then September 11th happened. And I was in my studio. I had the like job that was in the office. And then after school, I also worked in the office for years with JP. And I was in my studio and like basically couldn't go home for days. And it kind of changed everything, actually. So I started making this work that was kind of dealing with disaster. So these sculptural projects, which I brought you, and for some reason it's so old, I didn't check it. It's not playing, I'm so sorry. But I I was dressing up as Hillary, and there was these floors that would drop out from under her. So she would be trying to like hang a chandelier, but the floor would like fall, so she couldn't hang the chandelier, so she would fall, but she would like try to get up. And of course, I made the chandelier, so everything was the scrappy wood stuff. Or she was like screwing like all these different things, but the floor would pop out. So basically, I was trying to deal with like what it meant for my entire world to change. Like basically, what you guys think of like the world is very different than what I thought of the world. Like, and I grew up in DC, so like, outside of DC is that, I had the fear of like, nuclear war, but it really wasn't a big deal. A nuclear war is like a huge deal, but we didn't really think anything would happen, even though I do remember these like tests in Washington where you had to like go under the desk and stuff like that. But when September 11th, it was like, wow, like this crazy shit could happen like at any moment. And it really changed my whole perspective. And then that's when I started doing these videos. And I did that video as Hillary on the floor, and I did a bunch of videos in the wood shop. So Hillary was like dancing on the, what's the shit? The thingy that turns. The radial saw. So Hillary, like the radial saw was here, and like Hillary's like dancing around it. And I had like one of my closest friends was like the woodshop guy, like one of those like woodshop guys, like real, like, and he would like do exercise videos with Hillary. And so it was a really exciting time for me, honestly. But I do always say this, is that I didn't make one good piece in graduate school. I made one decent piece, but that's it. And I was torn up in graduate school. So I have this belief system that some people like and some people don't, but I'm not gonna go into someone's studio and pretend like that everything's great, because that doesn't help, And for me, the things that made me like have a voice and be like a better artist than I was when I came in was having this honesty in the studio, which if you're not getting, you should demand it, because that's the only way you're going to get better as an artist and find your voice. And then hopefully you find your voice, and then it's like super fun and also painful all the time, but also like it's super exciting. So that's kind of like a backstory of like making the work that I'm making now. I'm gonna move through a ton of video, talk over it, and we're gonna have a conversation. You're gonna like, and I know a lot of you in here, so if you don't ask me questions, I'm gonna call on you to ask me questions. So just like, let's make this like conversational and ask questions and ask like questions that you think are stupid. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm sorry, I did try to bring you the one from graduate school, but of course, it's like, it was high 8, it had to be converted. And I'm also super unorganized, so I apologize in advance. Like I give these talks and I never know what I'm gonna talk about until I'm there. And I have to feel the vibe of the audience. Okay, so this is one of the earlier pieces. This is from 2003. Again, this is kind of like a September 11th-y piece. This was shown at the Bronx Museum for this program called Artists in the Marketplace. Do you guys know this? If you're graduating, I don't know what it is like now, but if you're graduating, you should apply. It's like sort of helpful in terms of like business stuff, but also they give you a show at the Bronx Museum, and then they give you a bunch of like studio visits and stuff like that. So this is these makeshift, this is from 2003, this makeshift sculpture, trying to organize stuff. And these fans start happening. So this was a studio that I shared with about 5 of my fellow students from SVA. They shot the video, they did the fans. Keep in touch with your community. Oh yeah, that was, part of it. I mean, there's a degree of like chaos in my work, but it's kind of like, I'm still bossy about it. It's like bossy, controlled chaos. So everything starts falling apart. It's me trying to organize it. Eventually, the whole thing falls apart. Wait. I plan, let me see, I don't know where it falls apart. I plan to a certain degree, with my stuff, like, I knew it was kind of janky, and I didn't think it would fall apart like that. I thought I would have like more of an opportunity to like organize the papers like by color. But everything I do is a one-shot deal, so I shoot once. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's still going to be shown. So it ends up just to be this other organizational mess. And I was wearing a lot of pantsuits for a while. So I would buy clothes at Loehmann's, which you guys don't have anymore, which is like the best place on earth, and then I would do these videos and then I would return them. So that's the earliest video I have. That's called A Construction for Disaster. That's from 2003. This is from 2004, and this is when like I was starting to show a little bit. So this was made for this show called Open House at the Brooklyn Museum, and then PS1 showed it for Greater New York in 2005. And it was a mistake. You know, I was alone in my studio in Dumbo. I was being kicked out because they were making luxury apartment buildings. So I had like a cocktail dress, and I had some duct tape, and I had a bucket and some plaster, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just stick my foot in it and see what happens. And I thought that I would be able to bang it against the wall a couple times. It would shatter and be like, haha. But I was stuck in this for a very long time. This is an edited video, which I usually don't do. So there's two versions of this video. There's like the 7-minute video and like a 40-minute. So I was stuck in this for 2.5 hours. You're not going to have any resolution. You're not going to feel good at any point, so don't expect to. I'm just like eternally stuck in this. And basically the tape, this was like, you know, tape, like mini DV tapes. And it's just me struggling with this body, this material, this object, this thing that's holding me back. No, I mean, the painful part was that the plaster was like trying to break my bones. Yeah. And then it's very heavy, so like every time you move, it's like twisting your knee and stuff. So eventually I did get out. I just had to roll around the studio to find an electric jigsaw, and I cut my foot out of this bucket. Yeah, and you know, because since this video, I'm never alone when I shoot now, like, someone's somewhere. I have like a safe word, you know. Yeah, it should. And as a sculptor, that's like one of my big materials. Like I should have thought about that, but for some reason, like it didn't. So this was like, you know, how, you know, looking back on it now, it was just like really like a struggle with trying to be somebody. Like you see this in a lot of my work, and especially the early work, like this desire and this ambition to be, or to sort of be something, or to be comfortable, or ambition, or goals, and then like to be held back or in some way, but sort of to be resilient in the same moment. Okay, so this is my listening. There's no end. It's just like everything just falls apart. Sorry. This is, so that was I don't want that. That was a piece that, you know, I would say that was like a very big piece for me, and that it got a lot of attention, and it was written about a lot, and it was shown a lot, and that was kind of the first, you know, actually I did a show before that piece at Exit Art, which is closed now, which was like the best place in the world. Mark, did you ever do something at Exit Art?
I went there a lot.
Oh, okay. Like it was like this wild place. And they gave people shows without looking at their resume. They just like liked work, and then they would like commission pieces. So that was like my first experience, and then from that, like, and that the piece I did with them got some attention, and then it sort of started building from that. This is called With Open Arms. This is from 2005. Again, two SVA or SVA alum on each side of the camera with tomatoes. No, it didn't hurt. These were like canned tomatoes, because I wanted them to explode more. You know, otherwise we did some tests, and the other ones, like, we just like, it was just nothing was happening. So again, everything was still made in the studio at this point, like these kind of like smaller productions. I was like acting in them, building everything, lighting everything, shooting everything, and I have like no skills to do any of those things. So everything took a really long time, but it was great to be in control of almost every aspect of what was going on in my work, besides the tomato. It just gets worse and just worse and worse. So they would throw stuff and then they paused. So they would have to give me a chance to like fix my hair or like cover my flower or something like that. So there were these pausings where I could like come back and like smile, and then they would just do it until it was gone. Yeah. Keeps going. So that's with open arms. It is sad, but I love. It's like one of my favorite videos. I actually think it's like a super like. It's like people think it's like masochistic and all this stuff, but I think it's like all about like, you know, you're taking all this crap and then like but you refuse to give in, you refuse. So this is another earlier piece. Again, shot in the studio, SVA people helping me out. And everything, I never like bought any materials. Everything was dumpster dived, wood. Like I would go to Home Depot and get mist tints for like $1. These outfits, they started to get ruined, you'd see, so they couldn't be returned. But they were like Filene's Basement or. So these are roller skates. That's chocolate coming down there. So this is like my Matthew Barney meets Paul McCarthy video. So there's this cake that I'm trying to get to. There's a chocolate cake up there. And this is actually super steep. It doesn't look as steep because of my expert video skills. It was actually really steep. I mean, I always get bruises and splinters and scratches and stuff. But like if I don't, I'm like, where's my like war wound? You know, I need like something to prove that like I did something. No, I walked it once. That's good. That's like, and it's great. It's an old video. I'm glad it's like, still people give a shit. Yeah, it's a fake wall. So there are these like elaborate vein systems in the wall. So people are like kind of pouring the chocolate in there, SVA people. You'll see. And I'm like, forget about it. I don't give a shit. Okay, so that's Cakewalk. Again, this is in my small 300 square foot studio. I was hungry after that workout. Again, I'm going to show, I think showing the earlier work is helpful because like you guys can see what you can do with like no money and no space and no one giving like caring about what you're doing. This is called Heartbreaker. Oh, this is a little bit off, but you'll get an idea. This is super long, so I'm just going to move through it. Again, same studio, really small space, found wood, crappy paint. And it's just me kind of just destroying this. There's these elaborate vein systems in there that make it bleed like a body would bleed, not Halloween-y. So I'm trying to like tear it apart. And then it ends up like a massacre. It's just like. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. No, I was going for like Southern girl, but everything I do ends up like looking like somebody who would work in like the office somewhere, you know. So these are like women who like are efficient. They're not super sexed out. They're not super conservative. They're efficient, like they could get jobs done. Like there's someone you would rely on, like to organize your closet. or like your files. So it's someone who can actually do stuff. But yeah, I always dress up for my videos in some way. I never take myself too seriously. I think it's hilarious. Yeah, humor, funny and dark. You know, like stand-up comedians are hilarious and they're like about to throw themselves off a bridge. You know, so I use humor and color and beauty in a way that makes people comfortable, relatively, entering the work. And then you have them there, and then because they're comfortable, maybe they'll stick around. And then you have the ability to kind of twist it a little bit. But for me, humor is really important. It's part of my culture. You know, it's a way that I communicate. It's the way that you're able to express things and not like tell someone that they suck or that they're a bad person or that you hate them. Like I can tell you to fuck off if I'm funny, you know, like, but you can't just straight up do that, you know. I mean, some people can, but I can't. So this is Main Squeeze. This was in PS1 for the Greater New York 2010. I mean, you're technically not supposed to be in 2 of them, but they had a like highlight of the year section. So I wasn't part of like Greater New York, but it was like the highlight of 2000, whatever. And this was like a big deal because MoMA bought this piece, and this was like kind of my first big, like when MoMA buys something, it's like a big deal, and you kind of start feeling good about yourself for like a minute. Again, made in like my crappy studio in Williamsburg. A camera on each side. I'm building and shooting everything. And the structure is built around my body. So it's made so that I am able to actually get through, but I just have to be in the exact right position to do so. I had been on a panel with Barbara London, who actually started buying video for MoMA in the 70s, was kind of like the first person to ever do that. She's not there anymore. And she became super supportive of my work. And I had a show at Pierogi Gallery, and they bought it from there. Commercial galleries, you know, there's good things. Money is good. I'm super into money, but there's a lot of issues when you do a certain type of work that you have to deal with. So, you know, and I'm happy to talk about that too, but where am I? Okay, and then, let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna move into more, I don't wanna do that. More like sort of newish work. So people started, to kind of like invite me to do stuff, which was great. You know, like they wanted me to build these things on site, and then they would shoot the video, or we would shoot the video together. And then the sculptural part would exist along with the video, which is actually the most ideal way for me to show my work, is to be able to have, because making of these objects are, for me as the artist, just as important as the action that happens in performance or video. So this was a piece at the ICA in Philadelphia. So it's a 24-foot sculpture. These are 5 levels of sheetrock. One side is painted gray, and the other side is painted the color of my shoes. I bought these shoes, and I love them so much that I made the sculpture like based on those shoes. So I just scanned the shoes, and it's the exact same color. So it's moving through these different walls to get to the back of the museum. Yeah, so this is like, I'm finally learning how to make a video and kind of understanding like what's important and how video works and its relationship to painting, quite honestly, like probably more than any medium, because you're dealing with this like 2-dimensional surface, and color pops and moves back in a very similar way. So this is like kind of the first video where the shots became as considered as the objects. And this was, so Amy Smith-Stewart, who teaches here, you guys know Amy, right? So Amy had a small gallery on the Lower East Side, and I worked with Amy for a couple years, and that was my best commercial gallery experience because she's really a curator. But she was great. We did a lot of projects together, and this was shown there. And I did actually, she had this tiny gallery. It must have been like 200 square feet, and we did an actual video in that space. It's not this one, but. Yeah, so you have this 24-foot sculpture, and then you have like a flat screen, and they also had a bunch of other works showing. So then it ends up, the back of the museum ends up yellow, which is the color of the shoes. So then it's like you kind of like, this is what happens with my work, like you finish something, you're like, what do I do now? Like it's done, do I go back? How do you end a video? So then I'm gonna move into like newer work so you get an idea. I have no idea. Oh shoot, I don't have that one. Sorry. There's problems with that one. Did you see that show? Did you like that piece? Yeah. I didn't love that piece. I had, you know, it's not a piece that like sticks to me.
I like that last one better.
This one, yeah, I like that one better. Okay, so then I'm going to move through things faster. Ask questions if you want. This is Blood from a Stone. This was commissioned by the Brooklyn Museum. They did end up purchasing the piece. They're one of the only institutions that actually have the sculpture and the video. I think it's up. I'm not sure. And this is like a pretty simple piece. It's this kind of shelf-like structure, and it's me lifting these 75-pound cast plaster cubes onto the structure. And when they're put on the structures, they bleed their color. So there's this, like the camera's like at a slight angle down so you don't really see. There's like this kind of moat on top of the structure, just plastiline and poured wet paint, and then the pressure just makes it. No. I mean, at this point, like to hold this kind of weight, like I don't have those kinds of skills. Like when I have to climb something or something has to like stay together, like I don't make them. I'm not secure enough in the way I make stuff. So that's what the piece ends up looking like. And this is a piece that I actually thought was going to end in sort of more of a chaotic, like there would be a pile of cubes on the floor because I didn't think I was going to be able to lift them up, but this like kind of adrenaline kicks in. Okay, so I'm going to show you Buster. This is, oops. So what's going to happen with your career is that you're going to work with a certain group of curators over and over again. There's going to be people who support you. There's going to be people who hate you, and they will always hate you. And there are going to be people who are going to support you throughout your career. And I've been lucky to have those people in my life. So honestly, like I've been working with like a same group of curators for probably 8 years. This is a piece I did with David Knorr, and this was when he was at the University of Southern Florida. But then he moved to Mocha Cleveland, and I did like a huge, museum show with him. And these are young curators at first, starting out, and then artists don't realize that you also have the power to support. Everyone thinks like curators or dealers or writers have the power and that we're just like sort of like their pawns and hopefully they support us. But you actually have the power to support these people as well, and they need you to build their careers as well. And that's definitely been what's happened with me. So these are like a ton of pots. And these were made by the students at University of Southern Florida. I'm not shooting at this point. The structures are too big. So basically, I'm designing the pieces. They're being built on site. And then I come in and break stuff. So these are pots. They're all filled with these different colors, color paints. And I'm walking the shelves. Totally by accident. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how they would break, and ideally, I was hoping to be able to step on them all, but some were stronger, and I had to break them and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, ceramics, I love ceramics, I love plaster, I love like these kind of really serious sculptural materials, But the language of this kind of material has, ceramics is having a moment. We all know that. But, how can we sort of make these materials do other things? They can be super contemporary. But also, like, what happens, like, it's so sacrilegious as someone who used to make pots. Like, you shouldn't do that. Like, you should not take these materials and have them, like, perform in this way. What happens when you do that? So I was on this pot kick. This is another one. This was shot in Israel again. Like, the shots are getting super complicated. I'm into these shots from above, which again, like, deals with, like, painterly space in an interesting way. This is like, the camera's like 25 feet in the air, and it's this kind of labyrinth of these pots. So I was really nervous about doing a show in Israel because color is so significant, So I was like, don't do yellow, don't do, like, they gave me a list of colors not to do. And then I was like, okay, I'll do this orange. And it turns out, like, that was the color of, like, the West Bank. It's like, what is it? It's like some crazy thing. And I didn't mean to do that at all. Like, Israel's hard to make art in. Like, because it's heavy. It's heavy. It's hardcore there, but it was super interesting, but it was really difficult because I think someone reviewed the work and talked about, like, the Old Testament or something. I was like, what? Like, no. But every place you go, there's a different conversation about it. So this kind of, I'm really into doing this shot from above. And I've been talking a really long time, so I'm just going to show a couple newer pieces, and then I'll show you some live performances that I do with groups of people, and then that'll be it. I do have that, yeah. That's up now. There's a talk actually and it's hard for you guys to get there. There's a talk next weekend, I think, and it's Jackie Windsor. She has a show up. Amy, who also, teaches here, and Michelle Lopez, who went here and also teaches here. And it's on minimalism, and Robert Storr is moderating it. So if you guys feel like driving up to the Aldrich, it's an SVA festival up there. So this is so long. This is an hour video, or an hour and a half video. And I'm starting to use text in my work. The last two pieces are going to have this. So this is, again, shot from above. So if you guys have ever been to the Aldrich, it has these, I'm in this room that has these very high ceilings. And Tiffany, who graduated last year, did my stenciling for me, and it was a horrible experience for her, but she was amazing. So basically, this is like a ton of lumber that sort of covers this. So basically, I'm taking all the lumber, throwing it, or dipping it in paint off camera, throwing it, or like placing it onto the structure, and then putting them upright until all the words sort of disappear. Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. It's like, and I feel like I kind of showed a lot of early work, because I did that because it's, I went to SVA and I wanted to show you earlier work. There's more of a progression that happens, but just speaking totally honestly, when people start like saying like, come do a piece in my place, I'll build it for you, I'll shoot it for you, and I'll do this, like, great, because it's a pain in the ass otherwise. Like, I'm busy, I've got shit to do, and I really don't have a ton of skills. So like, I'm not one of those people who are like, I have to make everything and blah, blah. I think that's bullshit, quite honestly. But I love to make stuff. I'm a maker. However, these kind of big projects, if you get, and quite honestly, these aren't that big of projects compared to like this piece I was commissioned, Amy did this show. I was commissioned to do this piece in response to like a Richard Serra piece. So if you're going to commission Richard Serra to do a piece, or you're going to commission a Kate Gilmore piece, let me tell you, there's like a big difference going on there, So a lot of that is kind of dealing with what it means, what does it mean for me to be like commissioned to do something in response to Richard Serra? Like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, as a sculptor, we have to look up to Richard Serra, we have to pay our dues, but we also like have to question the history of him, you know. Is that, you know, there's a whole macho sculptor, macho painting, macho artist history. So what happens when this kind of body and this kind of macho work happens in these kinds of environments, in relationship and in conversation with that kind of work? Well, the punchline is, so it's, what's the piece? It's called, the Richard Serra piece is called something, a roll, or can't remember the Richard Serra piece, but this is called A Roll in the Way. And then I just did a way, because I didn't want to be too like literal about it. Like, so I just did way, way, way. And actually, I don't know, like, I don't think I have like a punchline or like a 1 + 1 = 2 with like any of my work, but I think there's a bit of a making fun of that's happening in this work, using like my body, my physical abilities, which happen to be pretty good. Like, I'm pretty strong. And quite honestly, I'm probably more macho than Richard Serra. Like, I probably have more physical abilities than Richard Serra does. And just speaking totally honestly, I could totally kick his ass, you know, like, but I'm just, so like, what happens when this like sculptor Richard Serra is in conversation with this person who doesn't have that kind of support, who doesn't have that kind of pedigree, you know, who hasn't had, you know, who's of this body, of this time, of this place. No, I was like, yes. No, because I'm a lover. Like, I love those guys. Like, I hate the history. I hate it. But I love it. I'm like a lover of art, you know? I love like a Donald Judd. I love a Richard Serra. Like, I love the power of it. I love the dominance. You know, I'm a lover, but I'm also like someone who is very aware of the mechanics of how the art world is structured, how economies are structured, power structures are created, hierarchies, tops of the pyramids. That's all part of, as an artist, you have to deal with that. I mean, you don't have to, but you are inevitably dealing with it in your work, because if you're a part of the art world, like, you can say, you know, there's this conversation, oh, so you're just making art about art, but it's not true. Like, art about art, like, what I've learned is growing up in Washington, D.C., and then now being in the art world, actually Washington, D.C. and the art world are like the same place. You know, it's like the power structures are the same, the amount of like women in the Senate and the amount of women like having solo shows, they're probably the same. The amount of black people in power and the amount of black people have, you know, it's like power across the line is fucked up, you know? And the art world is a way for us to kind of, when you're in it for a long time, to investigate what it means to be a player, what it means to be someone active in that particular moment, in that particular place. While also being in love with making and being in love with the history of art, you know? So this is super long, guys. So it ends up like this. This is in the space. It's a 16 by 9 sculpture, and there's something like 500 logs. Oh wait, no, it's done. I did it. Trust me. Like, there was not an inch there. See? Trust me. I almost like, I'm like, and I'm really out of shape too. And I was like, fuck. And then I'm going to show you my most recent piece that happened 2 weeks after that. This is my other text piece that I'm super into this text thing. And then I'm going to, you know what, I'm not going to show the performances. I think I'm going to end it, and you guys can ask questions if you want. If you want to ask art world questions, I'm happy to answer that too, because I know people are like not super into answering it, but I'm like super into answering it. Well, I think it's super obnoxious for a video artist to make you watch a whole video. Do people do that? Yeah. I think it's obnoxious. I mean, unless it's really good. Like, I mean, unless also like you make one video like every 2 years. Like, I make a ton of work, you know, so it's a little bit different. Like, I don't make a ton of work, but I make a good amount of work. I don't care. You know, I make work. I'm super invested in it. I put it in the world. If you watch it, you watch it. If you don't, you don't. You know, like, and I'm not going to make someone watch my work. You know, that's why you as a maker, you have to be generous. You have to think about your viewer every time you're making something. How do you make someone want to watch your work? How do you make someone want to care? You know, how do you make someone want to invest in what you're making? That's super hard. That's so funny. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I don't care if people watch my work, but at the same time, I'm always thinking about how I can make someone watch my work. Does that make any sense?
You want to make it as interesting as it...
Like, I feel like I did, like, it makes perfect sense to me, actually, when I say this. Once it's, yeah, I guess that's it, but it's also like, yeah, I guess that's it, but I'm one of those people who's like always thinking about the viewer when I'm making stuff. Like, if my work wasn't out in the world, I don't know if I would be making this kind of work. Like, I make work to be out in the world. So I guess I do care if people watch it, but
only to a point.
yeah, I don't think people have to watch the whole thing. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's more it. I guess I realize like some people are just not gonna watch. You know, like they're just not into it. Like I'm not gonna look at certain things either. You should see me go through a museum. You know, I'm gonna look at some things for a really long time and I'm gonna like last 10 seconds at some other things. You know, so we all have a thing as artists. We have something that we are looking for. So you should think about this every time someone's coming in your studio too. You know, everyone has a thing. You know, we all have a background, we all have a place we're coming from, whether it's a societal place or an artistic place. We all come with baggage wherever we go. So I guess I'm making work for people who might watch it. Okay, I talked a really long time. Do you guys have any questions? No, that's great that you take that from it. You know, I mean, you know, I think we all enter our work with these ideas, and I mean, I don't want to say we all because I don't want to generalize. Everyone works differently, but I enter my work with ideas, and I make stuff, and it comes out, and I'm like, oh, there's all this other stuff. There's all these other references. There's all these other artists in this work. You know, there's all this other history. And that's what's like super exciting. And there's all these ways to view it. Of course, Beat It is like someone jacking off, you know, of course. It's also a Michael Jackson song. It's also me beating the shit out of the sculpture, you know. But yeah, totally, you know. So that's awesome. It's the shot. So it's, I always set up a shot before I build anything. I actually should have probably told you that. So the way I make something is I set up a shot and then everything's built to spec. So I see what the camera sees and then we build everything based on what the camera sees. So it's kind of like most people doing this would build a sculpture or build their thing and then fix their shot to the sculpture, like somehow fit it in. But for me, everything's based on the perspective of the camera. So dealing with only what the camera sees. It was, but it was like badly shot because I was doing everything. But now I have people who have like, can do things, you know, like, and have like nice big equipment things, you know. But yeah, everything is building out, seeing what the camera's gonna see, seeing what the perspective is, seeing what's gonna pop and what's gonna move out. And then like how space is kind of figured, and then building based on those like to the inch of the shot, which is really hard. Yeah, all those boys are there for sure. You know, Stella, I made a piece based on a Stella painting. Yeah, they're all there as reference, and then there's usually some like super laborious thing that happens, and then some very simple thing. But yeah, it's all those people are there, you know, like I said, I love this stuff, you know, but there's a lot of issues with it too. The politics behind it are problematic. Yeah, I think it's, you know, these live performances, which I'm not going to show just because we're running out of time, but I work with groups of women or groups of people to do these kind of very physical things as well. I don't do live performance ever, but those are harder for me, and I've tried to do some videos with them as well. But there's something about like I guess, my brutality that I'm interested in, like the way that I can handle materials and my strength and all that stuff and my body and all that. So, you know, for a while I thought I wasn't going to be in the work anymore because I was really sick of it, and then I just like kind of missed doing it. So I don't want to always have to do it though, quite honestly, so I'm trying to find ways of incorporating different elements into it. So the last piece, the Beat It piece, I am off camera quite a bit. But it's something in process, you know. There is something about the way I can kind of move materials that I haven't been able to find, I haven't been able to replicate in another way. So they're probably personas, but they're kind of all the same person. Like basically it's not, you know, these are probably people that I grew up with or people I've seen or, you know, I am interested in a certain generation of women, which happens to be my mother's generation. We all have mother issues. And Hillary's generation. So, you know, I'm interested in this, like, these, like, moments of change, and that generation of woman, like, was, you know, those were the beginning, like, ERA women, you know, they were, like, you know, the working women who still had, like, 2 kids and, like, had dinner on the table, but still, like, were 1950s-ish, in, like, even though they were, like, on the lines, they were still, like, they had, you know, or not everybody, but they were like, made sure they had lipstick when they went out, you know, like, you know, so I'm very interested in those moments of change and transformation, like that precise moment. So I'd say these are characters, but they're still very much sort of built in this kind of female character that I understand pretty well and am interested in. This woman who appears to have it all together and appears to kind of be in charge in some way, but like everything kind of falls apart at the same moment. Sure. I mean, I would be uncomfortable simplifying it to that degree, but you could say that there's elements. I mean, I wouldn't discount it, you know, but I would hope that there's more complexity in the work than that. But for sure. I mean, I guess, yeah. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, I'm kind of like a super formal person. Like, and when the performances, the problems with those is the documentation is just awful. And someone walks in front of your camera, someone's talking, like the weather is bad, you know. It just, for me, it doesn't, I'm not able to control it enough to have the image that I want of it, you know, because there is like, I have a strong, like, aesthetic, you know, that I want from the work. But, you know, what I do is these other performances, I'll just, while I'm talking, bring them up. But they don't exist, when they're live performances, they don't exist in video. They only exist in the performance or they exist in photographs. So you're able to edit a little bit more. You know, for me, I found that it was easier to like show, like be more vulnerable and like kind of show like control what, and experience more when you can like kind of like have a shot, you know, a tight shot. So yeah, the performances, and also I hate performing live. I did it once and it was awful. You know you're a performer when you're like sick before and you're like, oh, I don't want to perform, and you go on and you do it and then afterwards you're like, ah. But if you're sick afterwards and there was no joy in it at all, you are not a performer. So, and that was me. I was not a live performer. I hated every moment of it, and I hated it before and I hated it after. So I just like the controlled environment. It was like I had this thing for a long time. This is the Bryant Park piece. These women were walking on this for an entire week for 10 hours a day. It was, sorry, you asked, what was the transition from school? How did I feel that? Well, when you're in graduate school, I was like, oh, I can't make a video in graduate school because everyone makes a video in graduate school. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. And then it was just like, I did it. And like everybody. And I was like, oh my God, this is it, isn't it? I'm going to be one of those people. And I just kind of embraced it. I had shame, but then I got over it.
Were you in that video?
Yeah, I've been in all of them. And yeah, I just kind of, I found my voice really quickly the second I like did it, you know?
What's your shame?
About video, I mean, it's less.
Video's the best.
Good. But I think, you know, it was, when I was, you know, video wasn't as like embraced as it was like 12 years ago. You know, there was a lot of issues with it, as there are a lot of issues with it now. But it was like, that had a lot of like, you know, there was like, you should be a sculptor, or you should be a painter, or where does video stand, or what's the, you know, there was a lot of things you had to deal with, which has made it super interesting, but also, you know, yeah, you just, when you're coming from this like place of like hardcore studio practice and you decide, even though, I mean, it's just as, the studio practice is just as intense now, you know, there's just a lot of like issues with what happens when it becomes like, when technology enters the picture. And then once you're like, technology is just a tool, just like building, casting a plaster cube. It's the same thing at this point, you know. Then you kind of release this whole like art school shame about making, you know, which I don't know if that still exists, but it definitely existed when I was in school. The labor, make, even though there was just as much labor. Yeah, I love my job because I get to like really like get a lot out in my work. You know, I'd say that the earlier work was more catharsis based, like was more like anger, rage, done. You know, it was like more orgasmic. And this work is the older work, the newer work as an older-ish person is longer and like more of a prolonged like grrr. So it's less rage, end. It's like a constant, slow, quiet rage. So catharsis is still there, but it's not to the same, like it's not like punching something till it's in smithereens. Even there is elements of that, but it's more of like a constant controlled motion. But of course, like I mean, that's why I ended up going back into making the work, being in it, because I really missed that like physical, time-based, goal-based, like it's like running a race or something. Like I missed that like competition, even though I'm competing with no one, you know, like I missed that like sort of intense physicality of it. That's to be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's to be seen, I guess. You know, the work, like I'm making 1.5-hour videos, which is awful. Don't ever do it. You know, like I think every video should be 9 minutes. However, I'm making an 1.5-hour video, which is like awful, and don't do it. But at the same time, that's how long these things take. You know, yeah, I don't know. It's hard for someone to, I don't know. I guess we'll see. You know, there seems to be support still. No one's. I mean, some support. Could always be more. This is another example of a performance. This was at Pace Gallery. This is a 7,500-pound cube of clay, and these women are tearing it apart throughout the night and throwing it all over Pace, the walls and floors and stuff. So I do these other performances, but I'm not in these pieces. Have men ever been in my performances? Yeah, I did this piece in Miami last year for this art public thing that Basel does, that Nicholas Baum, who is the director of Public Art Fund, another curator I've worked with like on 3 projects again. You know, these people always, not always, but when you have relationships, they, you know, nurture these relationships because people support you throughout your career. I don't know if I have that actually. Oh yeah, so these are men and women that kind of look alike. And they're sledgehammering these steel cubes in this really fancy pants opening. So it's super loud, but these men and women, like they look exactly alike, so you don't, and it's dark, so you can't really tell who's a man and who's a woman. So that was the only time I've actually used men. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, oh yeah. Sure, what does that mean? What do I have to do?
I wanted to ask it, but then I was
That's cute. That's cute. If booze is involved, yes. That's sweet.
She'll get you food.
Oh, well, I don't need any more food.
She gets me food all the time.
Good. Cool. Well, that's a good way to end it. Thank you so much. Your questions were awesome.